There are so many debates online, in the world, in people's living rooms, talking to family and friends on whether or not we as Black people should be visiting countries where they're known to be racist, or where people go and feel very unwelcome. And I'm not sure if I'm on like the contrarian side or not, but I did kind of want to talk through why I personally still have plans to go to some countries that are very well known for their iconic levels of racism, and also why I've chosen to visit certain countries that I've seen online get torn apart, for their, different people's experiences with racism and whatnot. So wanted to talk through that, go through some of the nuance. I think there's a lot around this topic, and yeah, I kind of wanted to have a discussion. So first and foremost, I saw, I remember seeing this a few months ago, where somebody, I think they were talking about going to Morocco. Maybe it might have been another like Arab country, to be honest. It might not have been African. Could have been like Dubai or something like that. But anyway, no, it was Saudi Arabia. That's what it was. Somebody went to Saudi Arabia and they were talking about how, basically the best part of the trip was getting their little souvenirs and leaving. um and there was a whole debate in the comments because I believe this person said, there were lots of people that stared, lots of people that just outright ignored them. And of course, there are comments like, I'm never going somewhere where my dollars aren't appreciated or where I'm not respected as a person, and, yada, yada. And while I do agree with that, I think there's a lot of merit to that, especially depending on the location and whatnot. I I have kind of mixed feelings about this because I have been to Morocco twice now, and I had an amazing time both times. But I also see a lot of discourse online where people are saying I had the worst experience ever, and that's also valid. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I feel like seeing somebody's negative experience, seeing, maybe a news report of uh, a black couple going somewhere and experiencing, racism and whatnot, discrimination, is that everyone's going to go and have a different experience. There are places I have been where I had the worst experience ever, but I know for a fact it was just the experience that I had, right? There will be people who travel somewhere for a month and it's like, oh my gosh, this was the worst experience of my life. And then there's somebody else who goes for a week and they have a great time and they have no complaints, and and I think it's one of those things where you never really know the experience that you're going to get until you go. And I have always kind of been the type to, within reason, to want to experience something for myself rather than strictly going off of the experiences of people that, like, frankly, I don't know. And that's not to say that, oh, they must not be telling the truth or whatever. It's just people have different experiences. Like, I have been to London multiple times. I know I'll probably end up going back, but it's not my favorite city. And I know people who go and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's the best city ever. This is so good, and the food is so good, and the people are so nice." And it just didn't do anything for me. But on the flip side, like Paris, I love Paris, and I haven't even had all positive experiences with Paris, but there are people that go and they're like, this nasty city, it's so dirty, the people are so rude, Parisians hate everybody. It just, I don't know, I just haven't had that experience. And it's funny as well because one of the last times I went to Paris, I was with two friends and it was their first time, and it felt like we had, like, any roadblock we could have run into, In Paris, we did. Like, we had some of the most stereotypical negative Parisian tourist experiences, like going to a restaurant and the waiter being rude and him talking to us in French and like talking way too fast, couldn't understand him, and then him just being like and then just starting to speak English. It was like it was multiple experiences that were just so stereotypical of like the experiences you see online. And so I know my friends are not the biggest fans of Paris. I still love the city personally, and I want to see more of France in general. Yeah, but that's one part for me. The other thing is there are so many layers to the different types of racism that people can experience, right? Like there's the systemic type, which is, redlining here in the states, or how a country is like built. Like there are countries even other than the states that are still built on the backs of basically slave labor. um I know Dubai is like that. There's a bunch of them, but Dubai is like that. Beautiful cities. There are parts of that city that you will never see because you're not like an indentured servant. um, that's been, I don't want to use the, I don't know if the word trafficked is the right word for it, but you've basically been swindled into going over to Dubai, working, for a family or for a construction company or whatever, and you find yourself in debt to this company that you can never pay off, and whatever other abuses are being experienced. Like that's one level of racism. And then there's the racism where it's just like cultural ignorance. I don't want to say just like it's not significant, because those can still lead to very traumatic experiences for people, right? um but I just say just in terms of like it's a different level. That there's just like cultural ignorance where you have countries who aren't like the states, where at least black folks have been here long enough, and people kind of have the general understanding of like, okay, they've been here for a few centuries now, we brought them here, so it's like most people at least have some experiences with black people versus, maybe some European countries where they were colonized but slaves weren't brought over. So then when there's more, immigrants, African immigrants coming over, they have all these negative feelings around them. That's a different type of racism. That's a different type of ignorance versus like the systemic stuff. And then there's just individual racism. They're just stupid people with stupid prejudices, and you're going to find them everywhere. Like, I'm sure you will see, thousands of positive experiences of black folks, going to Thailand and Bali and, whatever other places. And you might have some random racist white man from Barcelona or France or England, wherever, and he's visiting Thailand, and then you have a negative experience with him because you happen to run into him 3,000 miles away from where you live. And all of these different types are, you may or may not experience them depending on what your intentions are in a country, depending on how long you're planning on staying, and just the pure chance of where you might be and at what time. Um, yeah, so I feel like there are ethical things to talk about as well, right? Like what are how do I say this? Um, if I know that a country permits, like I was saying, like Dubai, where you know that a country is built on the backs of people who are essentially slaves still. Like there are cities for people who have been swindled into moving into this country for construction and to be housemaids and to be, whatever. how ethical is it for me to go visit that place and contribute my tourist dollars? There's something to be said for that. But also, I'm sure there are many people who are like, if I spend $1,000 in this country, whether or not I spend it here is really not going to make a difference. Now, how you feel about that is up to each individual, right? Um, but that's an ethical thing that each of us kind of has to confront. Um, sorry. And then on another level, there's also, going back to the beginning, I'm like, I don't want to spend my money where I'm not welcome. I am personally of the mindset that, well, okay, again, there are levels to this. There's a difference to me between, going to a restaurant where the staff won't look you in the eye, or, patronizing a bookstore where the owner doesn't want you touching anything, and going to a country where, like, yeah, a portion of the population is ignorant, is racist, and spending your dollars just in the country in general, maybe trying to avoid those negative experience, the ignorant people. I i personally feel like I understand where people are coming from when they say, I don't want to spend my dollars somewhere where I'm not welcome. However, I think a couple of things. One, not that it's like my my responsibility by any means, but hmm, how do I put this? Not that it's my responsibility to change anyone's mind, but with exposure, there are a lot of people whose views change and soften over time. And I personally am not going to allow, one racist person, like think about how crazy this is. There are people who will write whole articles on, the fact that they went to a bookstore in Poland, for example, and the owner didn't want them touching any of the books, and they scowled at them the whole time, and they could have sworn that they said, a Polish slur for a black person under their breath, and hurried them out of the store and whatnot. And this bookstore owner, who I have never met, who will probably never see me even if I do go to Poland, has now stopped me from seeing all the monuments, all the architecture, tasting all the food, having all of these potentially life changing experiences because they were racist once and have no idea who I am. That's wild to me. And even if I do go somewhere and experience a level of racism, I personally don't want to let some random ignorant person stop me from my dream trip. If it is my life's dream to see Big Ben, to see the Eiffel Tower, to see the floating markets in Thailand, to see the Cape Town skyline, to see whatever it is, you really think I'm gonna let itty bitty Polish Betty Sue stop me from achieving my dream, stop me from seeing the, like, for me, I just feel like, one, Little Miss Racist Betty Sue, I'm so sorry if there are any very nice Betty Sues watching, but it's crazy to me to allow that person's ignorance stop me from experiencing all of these things that could be so fulfilling to me in my life. um to me, that's more important, personally. And obviously, with the other things that we've talked about, with the ethical and moral dilemmas and the different types of racism, like, there's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot to think about here. But personally, there are countries on my list that I've heard people talk so poorly about. And maybe it's warranted. I'm definitely not saying that like, oh, you should be nice to these countries and just like, man, they don't care. Um but for me personally, I feel like there's so many reasons to go that yeah, I don't want to let somebody's ignorance stop me from seeing what I want to see, from seeing, from having these different experiences. Yeah, and this might be a little toxic of me, but I almost feel like for a racist person, if they're like, I don't want you visiting my country and you're so this and so that, yeah, if you say so, but I also have the bragging rights of having seen your country, and what you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it, Betty Sue? I don't know. I don't know. I Yeah, I feel like there are too many beautiful places. There's too much good food, and there are too many decent people living in places with bad reputations. Again, like bringing up Morocco, we met amazing people our first time in Morocco. It was a family trip, and I think there were what, 9 of us, 8 9 of us that went on that trip, and our there was like a security guard kind of that worked at the Airbnb. He was the nicest, gentlest man. Literally, he was like, "What do you guys need? If you guys go out to the markets and you want to buy these souvenirs, they're going to overcharge you, but if I go for you, like I can get it for like a third of the price." And like he was so sweet. He recommended us like different spas to go to. He's like, "Whatever you guys need, I got you." And granted, like there's definitely something to be said for the fact that like people who benefit from your tourist dollars are usually going to be more welcoming than your average person living in whatever city. But I I don't know. And even my tour guide on the second trip, he was amazing. He was unbelievable. Anything I wanted to do, he was like, "Okay, we'll figure out a way to do it. I'm going to make sure you see everything you possibly want to see." And even messaging his business partner, wonderful. Via, WhatsApp. And yeah, I would hate to have missed all of these experiences because I read something negative online, or somebody came back and was like, "Oh, Morocco was horrible," and da da da. Obviously, each of us has to make our own decision, right? But man, I just feel like there's too much in the world to let some prejudiced people stop you from doing stuff. And there's a lot to consider. Each person has to figure that out on their own, especially, if you're like most Americans, where it's really difficult to get out of the country in the first place, or you have limited, like very limited PTO, and you're like, "Look, I need as much of a guarantee as possible that when I go to this place, I'm going to have a positive experience." Like that's super important too. Or you save up your coins and you go somewhere, you want to have a good gosh doggone experience. Like, I'm not trying to pay $600 for a round trip ticket to wherever, and I'm mistreated when I go. Like, all of those are valid concerns, and valid things to think about, to consider as you're thinking about where you want to travel. But for me, in my circumstances and where I've been, the number of places that I have been where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I had a wonderful time," and somebody else is like, "Ugh, I will never go to that country." Or same with my family. Like, I remember I was looking at another girl's YouTube video, and she was like, "Don't visit Argentina unless you're unless unless you're like rich and white." And I have family members who literally just got back from like their fifth trip from Buenos Aires and had an amazing time. So, everyone's experience is going to be different. But those are some considerations that I personally was thinking of as I was kind of reading through this thread, and people had such strong opinions, rightfully so. Understandably, it just, I don't know. I For some of those, I had different thoughts. So, I wanted to share that. And yeah, that's it, y'all. If you don't know, my name is Alexis. I post here on YouTube every single day. Today is day 35, and my goal is minimum 100 days of daily posting here on YouTube. I talk travel, solo travel, career pivots, and moving into tech sales, navigating big life choices, all that sort of stuff. So if that's interesting to you, feel free to hit the subscribe button. And I'm curious, I'm sure just about everyone has some kind of opinion on this. I would love to hear your perspective. And yeah, maybe we can have a dialogue. So, anywho, y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.